Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet of ours. Welcome to Sustainability in Your Ear. This is the podcast conversation about accelerating the transition to a sustainable, carbon neutral society. And I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Thank you for joining the conversation today because we're going to take a deep dive into an environmental issue that may be lurking in your own closet: microfiber pollution. Now, you may not see them, but our synthetic clothing sheds millions of tiny fibers that make their way into our atmosphere, oceans, and rivers. It's been less than a century since the first introduction of synthetic textiles. In fact, nylon was the first in the 1920s. But microfibers are now found everywhere on the planet, from the peaks of the Himalaya mountains to the guts and bloodstreams of our bodies and those of mammals and marine life. Our guest today is Rachael Z. Miller, a leading voice in the fight against microfiber pollution. As the founder of the Rosalia Project for a Clean Ocean, Rachael has dedicated herself to documenting and mitigating the impact of this invisible pollutant. She's also a National Geographic explorer who has visited the Arctic and Antarctic to study the spread of microfibers, and her work shines a light on how something as simple as washing our clothes can have a far-reaching consequence for the ecosystem and wildlife. And she recently posted a story on Earth911 called "Polar Bears and Penguins Aren't Wearing Our Clothes, but They Might Be Eating Them." We'll include a link to the story in the article that goes with this podcast. Check that out. We'll be discussing Rachael's pioneering efforts to raise awareness, her innovative solutions, and what we can do to reduce microfiber pollution in our daily lives. So stay tuned for a conversation that could change the way you think about your laundry routine. You can find out more about Rachael and her work at rosaliaproject.org. Rosalia is spelled with a Z and is all one word, no space, no dash, rosaliaproject.org. We'll get to the conversation right after this quick commercial break. Welcome to the show, Rachael. How you doing today?
Thank you very much. I'm great. It's a beautiful summer's day in Vermont. How are you?
Doing well, doing very well, and thank you so much for joining us, as well as for contributing the article. It was a great read, and I wanted to get you on the show and talk about it a little bit. A lot of our audience is familiar with microfiber pollution, but some folks may not know, where they came from and how they reached the environment. Can you give us a quick rundown of microfiber pollution, the problem?
Yes, simply put, microfiber pollution happens when small, often microscopic bits of textiles or anything that is made of fiber, like fishing line or something, infrastructure, textiles, but especially our clothing and home textiles, when these little bits break off and they end up in our environment. That's the simple definition. It could also be thought of as fiber fragmentation.
So we're talking about things that are nanometer size in some cases. Can you see this stuff ever?
You can see it, you can see it related to your washing machine
Mhm.
if you were to filter the water coming out, but most people can't do that. So dryer lint
Mhm.
is the part of this problem that is being caught by your dryer. But if you have the opportunity, like your dryer is vented directly outside, which most are, you could go outside and look at the bushes outside your dryer and no doubt see the evidence of fiber fragmentation and the fact that it's getting blown out into the air right there outside your dryer.
A great example, and too often we want to see this evidence, and it's so hard to surface this evidence. So, what initially drew you to the issue of microfiber pollution? What woke you up?
Through a nonprofit that I founded called Rosalia Project for a Clean Ocean, we'd been working on the problem of marine debris since we started in late 2009, so working since 2010. And we'd been working on derelict fishing gear, consumer debris, and microplastics. But it was an article, a popular science article, like exactly what Earth 911 does, I have to say, that turned us on to this problem. It wasn't a scientific journal, it was reading an article that kind of was breaking the story of our clothes falling apart and those little bits from our clothes ending up, in that case, in the ocean is where it was first discovered. And, when we heard that, or when we read that, it was a problem that screamed at us.
Mhm.
There's like things that kind of speak to you a little bit or move you a little. This was something that absolutely screamed at us, our group with Rosalia Project for a Clean Ocean. And we thought, well, we never thought of this, but of course this is happening. I mean, your jeans go white, or it opens at the knees. Your favorite t-shirt goes super soft. That happens, we're aware, but I never thought about where that stuff went. Once we thought about where it went and we realized that away isn't anything but in the environment, and especially in our public waterways, we knew we had to be part of the science, and the solutions, and the word spreading about this problem.
Well, you're so right. There's no such thing as away. We don't throw something and it disappears. It persists in the environment. So when we think about plastic pollution, particularly when we think about ocean plastic pollution, a lot of people focus on bags and so forth, but the microfiber pollution is just, it's thick in the soup of the garbage jars and so forth. Can you characterize how microfiber pollution compares to other forms of plastic pollutions in terms of volume and impact?
Of course. This is a little bit of a problem with units, and not so much comparing apples to oranges. We're sort of all in this plastic pollution or marine debris world. It's more like comparing how we compare the pieces. So, for example, we see a lot of consumer debris and derelict fishing gear, and collectively it weighs a lot, or it takes up a lot of physical space. And that's one thing. Now, with the microplastic and microfiber pollution in particular, it doesn't necessarily take up a ton of space. But the situation is that it doesn't take up a lot of space. Its smallness is part of the problem. You can't reach down and pick it up. It transcends, we're learning, all the boundaries. So it can float, it can fly in the air, it can sink, it can be taken on or ingested or inhaled by creatures at all levels of the marine food web. And now we know it is being ingested and inhaled by humans. So while you can't use weight or volume as a particularly indicative measure of the problems related to microfiber pollution, what we can use is the fact that in every region in which the world geographically, so thinking of the world kind of across latitudes and longitudes, wherever people have looked, I've yet to read a paper that says there's none here. Not every sample has microplastic or microfiber in it, but every region in which people have sampled, or every location, has had it. Furthermore, it is being shown to be in multiple environmental compartments. We ourselves did a study where we sampled the whole Hudson River in the air at 2 heights, in the water at 3 depths, including the surface, and also in the soil. And again, we didn't find microfiber or microplastic in every sample, but we found it in every environmental compartment and in every kind of region of the Hudson River. And finally, it is proving, the more science is done looking at creatures and humans, it is proving to also be able to transcend internal membranes and tissues and other types of internal processes that are transferring this stuff to very nearly everywhere. I can't quite say that completely yet, but close.
Well, it's been found in umbilical cord blood, for instance, which is just shocking. And if you think about the impact on the fetus as it develops of plastic pollution, it's extraordinary that we would do this. Now, your Earth911 article brings this to life in another way, and you explore how the food chain has allowed microfibers to reach penguins and polar bears at both ends of the planet. Tell us about those research trips. What did you find?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible because we have gone on these incredible expeditions with Lindblad Expeditions and National Geographic in order to investigate microplastic and microfiber in the air and the surface water of some of the most remote and beloved places on the planet. It was so cool to visit these places, I have to say. I'm a total fan of ice. and the creatures that are around the ice, like polar bears and walruses and penguins and albatross. And anyway, what we found was that there is microplastic and microfiber in these far-flung places that really cannot be the sources, but can only be the sinks. So think about that, source and sink. And the implications of it being a sink are that it is bioavailable to the creatures that inhabit these places. But for us, why it's important to know how far afield this type of pollution is getting is twofold: to understand its implications in the big picture, and to use that understanding in our messaging and communications to inspire solutions. That this isn't just a problem that needs to be addressed in a city only, but that this pollution is going as far afield as is possible.
Well, and I think the food chain that you describe is illustrative of what we should be thinking about too. So, krill or pelagic fish like sardines, herring, eat this stuff, then they are consumed by something else, and it just moves up the food chain. Is there anything that we can do to help prevent that in these places that at least temporarily are largely free of microfiber pollution?
And that's a good reminder. I said that we found it, but the good news is we haven't yet found it in huge amounts. The amounts that of microfiber and microplastic pollution that we found in the air and the water in near Svalbard at 81 degrees north and in the Southern Ocean and the Antarctic are still far fewer counts of this stuff than we are finding in other places that we've sampled extensively, like the Hudson River or Long Island Sound. So that's the good news. As far as preventing it goes, that's where we really do have a collective opportunity here. This isn't just a done deal. So there are ways to, as individuals, reduce the amount of microfiber that we are inadvertently producing. That's another thing, is this really is not a problem of sort of intentional disobedience. This is a byproduct of goods and the textiles that we're using. So as individuals, we have some control over this and how we take care of our clothes, how we choose the clothes that we use, and what we do with them. As a group of people who are owners of companies or at the industry level, there's opportunities to make clothes more resilient and make them out of more sustainable materials, less harmful on the back end. As governments and municipalities, there's opportunities to help the consumers do this more effectively by offering washing machines and dryers with emission standards and other types of actions. So the good news is there's already a host of solutions and actions that we can collectively take, not just sitting on the shoulders of consumers, to reduce this problem.
Are there any technological advancements in terms of cleaning this stuff up that you think are promising?
I am always optimistic. I am always optimistic. In this case, however, I don't think cleanup is viable. I am not a fan of vacuuming the ocean to get the plastic out, because the problem is these pieces are as small as the smallest creatures in the ocean. And if you think about plankton, as not super cuddly as it looks like it should be. I wish we could figure out how to make plankton like cuddly and more awesome to everyone. It is so very important, and we cannot risk hoovering up some of the most important elements of the ocean in order to get the plastic. Until we have something like a plastic magnet, which also would be very difficult because the word plastic is inadequate to really describe the diversity of materials that it encompasses. I just don't think this is a back end fix at all. This has to be, for me right now, a preventative, collective levels of prevention. And what I mean by that is consumers taking action to protect their clothes. And I've got a great list of how everyone can do that. Municipalities and governments looking at how to collectively reduce this problem. The fashion industry and other textile industries also looking at how they collectively prevent this problem. So for me, this is largely a prevention challenge.
So reduce first, and then we'll figure out the rest later. That's the
Yeah,
immediate way to make an impact.
I really think, and I do think it's possible. I really do. We've been relatively unaware of this particular problem. It was only kind of discovered in 2011.
Mhm.
And at that point, it was very focused on washing machines only. And so, it's barely a decade old as a problem that we know. And to think of how much has happened in those 13 years, it's pretty incredible. But I hope that the pace continues at this speed.
That's encouraging. And there's a lot more to dig into this conversation. So we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Now let's return to our discussion about microfiber pollution with National Geographic explorer Rachael Z. Miller, who also founded the Rosalia Project for a Clean Ocean. So, Rachael, how do you raise awareness about microfiber pollution? What makes the problem click for people?
Prior to 2022, and still now, my best way to connect people to this problem is to say this. Everyone who wears and washes and dries clothes is part of this problem. And everyone who wears, washes, and dries their clothes can be part of the solution. This is not a problem that feels super other, like derelict fishing gear. A
Mhm.
lot of people have a really hard time kind of connecting their lives to the horrors of derelict fishing gear. Uh, a lot of people even have trouble because, say, they are doing their best to recycle. They disassociate themselves, they don't litter. And so they
Mhm.
disassociate themselves from consumer debris, although just not littering and recycling doesn't
Do
completely
enough.
disconnect, but that's still a situation in communication. And it is an extra challenge to be communicating and trying to inspire people to be interested in a problem of something that they can't see with their eyes. So the good thing is that everyone wears clothes and all clothes break. It seems like such a weird sentence. I would have never said that sentence before starting to work on this, is like to have broken clothes. I mean, like a button could break or a zipper could break, but I am talking about the actual threads in
Mhm.
your clothing breaking and causing a potential incredible amount of harm. And that brings me to the messaging that only recent scholarship has allowed us to add. And that is the situation as it relates microplastics and microfibers to human health.
Mhm.
There was virtually nothing slash very little before kind of 2022, 2023-ish. And even just this year, there's been 3 extremely pivotal peer-reviewed research papers that have come out. Pivotal in that what we had prior simply said, there is plastic in blood. There's plastic in lung tissue. There's plastic in, well, throughout the reproductive systems of both men and women, including, like you said earlier, of like placentas and umbilical cords.
Mhm.
We knew it existed. And as people do more work where they're able to look in human organs, they're finding it. In fact, there was just a study that was recently released. Someone shared it with me last night that it has now also been found in brains that were, this is this is under review still, so this one's not published yet, in brains that were dissected, human brains in this calendar year. So that kind of was the first piece. Is it in our bodies? The answer is yes, in more and more places. But clearly there needs to be another question, which is the so what?
Mhm.
So what are we just, is it just going through and ending up a wastewater treatment plant problem? Like what's happening? And the information that's come out, especially this year, is showing that no, in fact, it is not necessarily just passing through without causing harm. And we now know that there are associated or correlated symptoms of ill health with the presence of microplastics. And, I'm not a toxicologist, so I can't go into this
Sure.
super in depth, but the one I want to share is was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in March of this year. And very cleverly, a team of researchers took arterial plaque that was removed from people who needed that removed in order to keep things rolling. There's 300 people in the study. It was removed anyway, so they got their hands on this stuff and dissected it, inspected it for microplastics. 60% had microplastics, and that 60% had a 4.5 times higher likelihood of experiencing stroke, heart attack, or death in the 34 months after that surgery than the group without microplastics. We have never had evidence like that about the potential harm or the associated harm that the presence of microplastics can have in the human body.
That's a shocking concept.
It's
They were able to literally link the presence to higher incidence of death in the next 34 months.
Right. So this is correlation, not causation. These were technically sick people who needed an arterial blockage removed. It's not a general population study, but it's a significant one in our road to understanding. And it's one of the first to make such a big correlation.
Are you aware? I'm curious as to whether or not this is the case. Are you aware of any research into the higher incidence of cancers among younger people and the increasing proliferation of microplastic pollution?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I think of that all the time. I right now am unaware of that particular correlation being made. One of the most recent papers that I've read had to do, just again, came out this month with a kind of they took human gut microbiome microbes and introduced in a sort of lab. So it wasn't in a human body, but it was with human material in a kind of a simulated colon. And they found that the presence of microplastics allowed the bad microbes to flourish.
Okay.
And that a disrupted gut microbiome is now also something where we can say there is a correlation there, that the presence of microplastics in the gut cause a disruption in the microbiome. And I have to say, I know a lot of people my age and even younger who are on all sorts of like anti-heartburn, like all sorts of medications for a digestive system that's not working correctly. And so while I'm not aware of direct links to the prevalence of, say, colon cancer or any other cancers, I know there are people working on understanding that. And it just all necessitates action from a prevention angle to reduce our collective exposure to this particular pollutant. And when you look at microfibers and the fact that they are in the air and we're inhaling them, that because they're in the air, they are able to end up on our food and in our beverages. And so we're ingesting them.
Yeah.
It really, for me, makes this unquestionably important to take action.
Well, and to increasingly understand, which is, I think, what we simply, we don't comprehend what we've done to ourselves already. And as you said earlier, we're early enough in the rise of microplastic pollution that we could potentially begin to reel this back. Now, the Rosalia Project focuses on both prevention and cleanup efforts. And I wanted to ask you to tell us about the marine debris tracker and what you've been doing with cleanup data cards to help people document their progress in cleaning stuff up.
I so appreciate this question because it is very easy for people to hear about Rosalia Project and call us a cleanup organization, which gives me the hives because we are not a cleanup organization. We are a prevention organization, and we use cleanups for two primary reasons. They are extremely important, but not as an end. They are the means to prevention. And here's what we do with that. So with Rosalia Project, we always collect data with our cleanups. I realize that not collecting data means we could pick up more stuff, but I would rather pick up half the stuff and know what it is so that we can prevent it than pick up all the stuff and never turn off the tap. So always with data, we've now picked up, because we collect the data, well over 1 million pieces of trash. But most importantly is we know what it is, and we are using that data to implement solutions in various ways. I have a great example. Well, I'll tell you the second reason, then I'll give you an example. Second reason is a lot of people never see it. And so a data cleanup can also help connect people, not just to amazing coastal places. And even if the coast is a pond or a lake or an inland river or the ocean, it connects people to a place, and it demonstrates how vulnerable these places can be to our man-made stuff. And adding the element of data to the pickup further makes the experience that much more powerful.
Well, this is what I've found at Earth911 as well, is that if people know where stuff came from, how to use it, and where it's going to go, just so that they're thinking about the process, they begin to adjust their behavior. And what was really encouraging to me, talking to Jane Goodall recently, she said the same thing, is that this, just being aware of our place in the ecosystem and how we're already changing, we've already changed the ecosystem, but can begin to recalibrate our relationship with it. So like the marine debris tracker, so it's an app, you can download it and you can record that you've cleaned up, but that just tunes you into the fact that there's more crap out there all the time that you have to pick up. It's not necessarily just the impact of picking it up, it's the learning that's important.
It's the truth. It's the truth. And thanks for kind of reminding me about that. Yeah. So the marine debris tracker is a way for anyone, anywhere, to be part of the prevention side of cleanup. And that means you're walking your dog, you see a bunch of bottles or bags or straws or bits of microplastic or whatever. It's a free app on all platforms. And the data goes to central place, depending on whose data card you use. You could use Rosalia projects. We love that. You could use the general one. It doesn't matter. It all is used in prevention. And so I'll just give you a cool example, because it just happened last month, is that we in Vermont and in Maine, where we do a lot of work, we see so much foam, like little tiny spheres of foam on the shoreline.
Let's be clear, styrofoam is what you're referring
Expanded
to.
polystyrene, yeah. So think about docks and what makes docks float, and a lot of the ways. And can you picture, sometimes you see docks with blocks of expanded polystyrene foam, like they're usually blue underneath, and that foam is unencapsulated. It's just like naked foam. Yeah, so a lot of people use this kind of naked or unencapsulated foam for docks. And the ocean or the lakes, wherever it is, it's not gentle. Even a lake is, the water always wins. The water will always destroy the stuff.
Yeah.
And so if you allow it to be vulnerable, that's what happens. And so we've been collecting data for 14 years. And we specifically had a section about foam. And for the last about 5 years, we've been specifically identifying dock foam separate from other types of foam. And we always had like foam cups as a category. Anyway, we just worked with the Conservation Law Foundation in Vermont. And now in Vermont, unencapsulated dock foam is banned in all of Vermont's waterways.
That's
and
great.
So that means, yeah, we're so excited. This is directly cleanup data to a solution. And there's a partnership now, a coalition of organizations through Sea Grant and UVM and University SUNY Plattsburgh and Rosalia Project to spread the word across the other side of the lake. So, I mean, it's one thing if Vermont does that, but we share the whole lake with New York State. So we do need kind of wholesale buy-in, would be better. That they're going to, with this coalition, including our organization, we are all going to work together to make sure that this new law is respected. And it's great. It's absolutely data for solutions.
So you mentioned earlier there's some simple actions individuals can take. What can you share, 3 or 4 of them?
Of course. Okay, so we'll start with in your own home and with clothing. One of the most important things we've established a couple times in this conversation is prevent microfiber in the first place completely. And this is like, for me, a sort of circular thinking. When you think of the circular economy, one of the first strategies is prevent the leakage. So that's leakage meaning man-made stuff into the environment. So prevent the leakage. That means take care of our clothes. Wash less. So this is really directed more for kids. Parents love it when I'm the one delivering this message, but not every single thing that you wear is dirty enough to be washed. And so that's one thing. The next is spot clean when you can. If you just have a little blob of something, just spot, doesn't have to be completely washed, because washing and drying is pretty hard on your clothes. The next is to wash in cold water. So that makes a really, really big difference. It's incredible, actually, how big a difference it is to wash in cold water. The next one is do 3/4 to full loads. That means less abrasion between garments happening. And then air dry when you can. We have an open source paper that establishes the link between electric vented dryers and microfiber emissions to the air.
Are there dryers out there now with filters that you believe will be helpful, or washers? And in fact, I remember when I was at Samsung, we were working with Patagonia to develop a washing machine that would filter. Are you seeing that progress?
Yes, yes. Thank you for the reminder. We are starting to see washing machines with settings that reduce microfiber. I know that Samsung launched that, but also there are not just companies that are working on inline microfiber filters for washing machines, but there are states that are working on requiring that. And that will in turn inspire some pretty fast innovation, especially if multiple states do it. We'll get complete sort of cross, it'll affect the whole supply chain.
So it sounds like we're seeing that progress potentially for stopping it in your home. Is there the suggestion that the same kind of filtering could be done at a larger scale in water treatment plants?
So the good news about wastewater treatment plants is that wastewater treatment plants have been shown in influent and effluent studies. So they take samples of the stuff coming in and they take samples of the stuff going out, and they found that especially in the US, where we have quite good wastewater treatment plant technology, that in the 90% of the microplastics and microfibers are stopped. So that part is good news. The part that's tough, I know this is the part that's tough, is that there's a mass balance problem. That stuff isn't necessarily disappearing. We think that it's ending up in the biosolids. So now we have to look at how each community is dealing with their biosolids. We know that in New Hampshire, due to PFAS concerns, biosolids that used to be put on fields are no longer. There's other communities that burn, that incinerate it. And then there's so many that I would normally say is amazing adaptive reuse of a biosolid into a fertilizer. Now, to get that to happen, it goes under extreme heat, and there's still some questions about whether that process helps to kind of vaporize a lot of the little fibers. There's still some information that we need to know. So there's still some concern that wastewater treatment plants themselves are doing a good job of it. It's not just being sent out into the effluent in huge amounts, although there is some in the effluent. Yeah, I don't think this is the place where we need to spend the most time, because what's being accomplished is it's pretty good. And then there's these other questions. It would be such a bummer to ruin a great adaptive reuse of material.
So what advice would you give to a policymaker or to a corporate leader who wanted to make an impact on their microfiber pollution at a larger scale?
Yeah, I love that question. And the answer is there are actions to take, and to please do it. So they're all, for me, based on reduction. So on the front end, with machines that jump in on these requirements that there's some kind of filtering going on, or there's some kind of maximum or emissions standards for both washing and drying. Our dryer study showed that a larger lint trap caught more than a smaller lint trap. It was kind of a pilot study on that. We didn't expect there to be such a big difference, but we had 2 dryers, and the other, mine had a smaller lint trap on it, and I regularly had more lint going outside the vent than my colleagues who had a huge lint trap, and she regularly caught more and emitted less. So there's some technology that may already exist to help do this. Oh, it also says for people, clean your lint traps, not just to keep your house from from burning down, but also to keep microfiber out.
Well,
So
so should we mandate that these filters be installed on devices the way that we did catalytic converters, for instance, in cars to prevent air pollution?
yeah, I'm all for that. So I think that's one way a policymaker can jump in on this, is looking at requirements for both washers and dryers. And another interesting one that Massachusetts took on last year or the year before is they straight up said no textiles in our landfills. And
Mhm.
I think this is fascinating way to go about it, because then it means that as a consumer, you're kind of stuck with the stuff,
Yeah.
and you have to make an effort or pay to get rid of textiles separately. And hopefully that in turn helps something that's so important for us to do collectively, which is to slow down fashion.
Yeah.
Is to, I have a couple more actions that sort of consumers can take, and that has to do with slowing down fashion. So thrifting, buying clothes that already exist, just taking care of your clothes better mean that there's a chance that the next person can wear them. I know not everyone can buy the good stuff, but investing in clothes actually does matter. There have been studies that have looked at, say, a very inexpensive fleece versus something like a Patagonia fleece, and has found that the more expensive clothing sheds less than the cheap stuff. And that's a tough one, because so many people are struggling. But when you have a choice, that is one that does make a difference. And then that you can also do some strategy. So I'm not throwing my fleece away. I don't encourage anyone upon hearing this podcast, please don't throw your fleece away. Keep it, take care of it, only wash it when it needs washing. And I just now wear it on the inside.
Mhm.
So I don't wear fleece on the outside anymore when I go outside to do sports. I wear something that's much lower shed. And you can tell something's lower shed because it's tight weave. You can even use your cell phone to have a look at the weave. Just go to maximum magnification, and you can start to see it. And if you've got a microscope, even better, microscope some of your clothes. You can also take some packing tape, and you want to be careful with it. Do it on the inside if you're worried, but packing tape and like white paper and dark clothes, just put a little piece on, rub it 3 times and kind of pull it off, and you'll be able to compare clothing to see how
Hmm.
much shed you're getting. It's pretty
Interesting.
fascinating. Yeah. And so industry wise, because I like to balance consumer actions with upstream of consumer actions,
Mhm.
industry wise, it is absolutely time for the people who make textiles and the people who design our clothing to get in on this of making more resilient clothing and considering the innovations required. And people are doing this. This is another thing that gives me hope, is making our clothes out of a material that is bio-derived, so not extractive petrochemical based, and bio-benign.
Mhm.
So for what does leak, we tried to prevent the leakage. Now we want to stop what does happen. So you prevent it, but it's not all going to be perfect. That's okay. There's no one solution. So now we want to stop it, and that's what filters can do, or lint traps and stuff like that. But there might be some that still escape. So then we need to think about that. And it would be better if it were kind of bio-benign on the back end, as
Mhm.
opposed to particularly toxic. And then, someday maybe there's a way to close the loop. That's the third thing.
Well, and someday we can accelerate with greater focus on this problem, and I think we're on our way. I wondered, recently the United States announced that it's going to participate in the global plastic treaty that's under negotiation in the UN. Does that give you hope that we might be on the brink of rethinking the way that society manages its pollution in the future?
Yeah, it for sure gives me hope. I think for this problem, which is a particularly, this problem is disrespectful of boundaries. Microplastic, really trash of all kind. If it floats or it flies, which a lot of consumer debris floats, a lot of the microplastic and microfibers can fly around the air. It doesn't care where it started or where it ends as far as country boundaries go. And so when we have a pollutant that is so global, I love, and it does give me hope that people are working on global level solutions and agreements.
There's a lot to do. And thank you for sharing so many good ideas. How can people learn more about the Rosalia Project and get involved?
Love that. So we put a bunch of links in the article. So definitely check out the article in on the Earth911 website. And then I would say, keep an eye on us, join us. I'm going back to the Antarctic at the end of this year. I'm frequently posting on Instagram about the experience and what we learn. All of our reports from the expeditions are free. We do them something called story maps. So check out rosaliaproject.org and then go to the CSI for the Ocean page. You can see story maps that inspired the article and the work that inspired the article. If you're on a Lindblad National Geographic expedition, come throw the bucket with me. That's a good one. We also have opportunities for people 18 and up. Our high end so far is 72, but we're willing to go higher, to volunteer for a Rosalia Project expedition on our expedition vessel, a 60-foot sailing research vessel in the Gulf of Maine. Sign up for updates with Rosalia Project and the Coraball. Follow all of us, including Inside Nat Geo on Instagram, and share your own actions. We would love to hear what it is you're doing. I am a believer in collective action, and not just on the part of consumers, but on the part of communities, municipalities, states, and nations. The way I like to say it is lots of littles make a big. Lots of a tiny little problem you can't even see adds up to big, big issues for our ocean and the creatures, and it's looking like humanity. But lots of small actions on the part of people in their homes and in their companies and in their governments can add up to big positive impact.
Well, let's hope those changes continue and go faster, because it would be just much better to live in a world without microplastic. And Rachel, thank you so much for the time today. It's really been fascinating.
Thank you. I'm with you on that. And thank you so much for all the work you do to highlight not just this problem, but everything that's going on and hopeful solutions.
Thank you, Rachel. You've been listening to a conversation with Rachael Z. Miller. She's a National Geographic explorer, and she's the founder of the Rosalia Project for a Clean Ocean. You can learn more about Rachael and her work at the Rosalia Project site. That's rosaliaproject.org, Rosalia spelled with a Z. And you can also follow her work at National Geographic. Rachael shared a lot of good ideas. And if you want to take a deep dive, take time to read her recent Earth911 article, Polar Bears and Penguins Aren't Wearing Our Clothes, but They Might Be Eating Them. She also mentioned CSI for the Ocean, which is discussed in the article. It's a fun science program that can get kids and adults engaged with the environment and what microplastics and microfibers shed from our clothing is doing to nature and our own bodies. I'm going to start by examining the weave of my clothing with my phone. I hadn't thought about doing that before. And I think the main takeaway is that by buying well-made clothing and washing it less frequently in cold water, we can make big steps to reduce our microfiber impact. But it'll also save you money in the long run, because your clothes are going to look better longer. It's just one change that we can make. And check Rachel's article and the Rosalia Project website for more of her ideas. Here's another change you can share. Would you take a moment to share this podcast or any of the other interviews we've produced for sustainability in your area with your friends and family? If you take a moment to write a review on your favorite podcast platform, it will help your neighbors find us. Folks, you are the amplifiers that spread more ideas so we all create less waste. Tell your friends, family, and coworkers they can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, or their favorite purveyor of podcast goodness. Thanks for your support. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Earth911, and we will be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.